Welcome to foHRsight, a podcast about HR, leadership, and the future of work. I'm one of your co-hosts, Naomi Titleman, and I'm joined today by our next special guest who's coming back to our show, Dan Pontefract. Dan is an award-winning author, leadership strategist, and keynote speaker, and has been a TEDx speaker 4 times, maybe more since we last chatted. Still 4. Dan is also an adjunct professor at the University of Victoria. And last time Dan was with us was on episode 48 when he had just released his then new book, Work-Life Bloom. And almost 3 years later, I'm so glad that he's agreed to join us again to talk about your new one, Dan. Love the title. The Future of Work is Gray. So welcome back to the show, Dan. It's great to have you here. Where are you joining me from? And how are you doing today?
Naomi, being a 2-timer, it's sort of like, I feel like, in SNL, we get those 5-timer jackets. So will you give jackets out if I get to at least a 3rd time back on the show? Will we do that? Is that possible?
I think that's a great idea. I mean, at the very least, I can promise you like a cool future forward pen, maybe a notebook. We have bags and mugs. So one of the above for sure.
I can't wait. And so Jack White, Jack Black will also be there, like just to be like, Yes, the musical guest. Unless you want to be the musical guest too. Oh, let's get into that too. I am coming to you today from Victoria, British Columbia, Canada, where Denise and I moved 12 years ago from Vancouver. Prior to that, Montreal. Prior to that, Hamilton. That's kind of my Canadian story. And what was the other question?
How are you doing today?
Well, how am I doing? I would say if we're given a kind of a point grade scale, I go with a 9.3 out of 10. I don't think anyone ever can be a 10. But yeah, about 9.3. It's had a pretty good week.
That's amazing. I'm also feeling about 9.3 because, like I said before we started recording, the sun has finally popped out in Toronto. So our listeners are sick of hearing me talking about the weather and how much weather affects my mood. But I'm in a great mood today because the sun happens to be shining in this moment.
Okay, excellent. So we're both in good moods.
Yes.
Let's not fall off a cliff. Let's
not fall off a cliff. So we're going to check in. Like we like to check in at the beginning of our episode. So the question for you today, Dan, is what's one thing that you do that may surprise people given your age?
Ooh. So I am on the cusp of 55. So in 2 months' time, recording today, I will be 55. Can't drive 55. Freedom 55. I feel like I'm 35. Got to be honest. 2 things for that, I think, related to your question, Naomi. Number one, even when I'm traveling, which I do a lot, on average, I will cycle either stationary or on my one of 3 bikes in my garage. Or garage, if you're English, about 300 kilometers a week.
That's amazing. Wow. Are any of them on the Peloton for chance?
No, I'm not a Peloton guy.
Okay, that's okay. I still like you.
I have a spinner just in cases where, Victoria sometimes will deluge a little bit of rain. So, and I'm, fair weather. I'm not going to go out and deluge. But yeah, about 300 kilometers a week. That is lots of thinking time. So I do transparent AirPods and I'll listen to your podcast and a bunch of others and then just get apprised of what's going on in the world. And number 2, I would say I am a recovering / wannabe DJ. And so maybe I'm taking something from the page of Cillian Murphy, but I have for years been a curator of music, and I'm talking like all kinds. And I just appreciate indie mostly. I appreciate all walks of life music and off the beaten track, although I don't mind the odd new Harry Styles or Tay-Tay. So I kind of, love to be in with the music crowd.
Great. And the fact that you just said Tay-Tay is something that surprises me, given you're almost 55. So that's great.
Come on.
Keeping it young, keeping it real.
Bring it on.
Yes. And therefore, you can also be our musical guest. You just have to DJ instead. Well, you probably play some instruments too. You strike me as one.
Yeah, I could do DJ or piano keyboard / ukulele. That's what I can do.
Perfect. Do all of the above and you will be a perfect 3rd-time guest and will receive your very own foHRsight pen or mug.
Can't wait.
All right. Well, let's start with you, Dan. For our listeners who may not have tuned in or may forget episode 48, can you share a little bit about your career journey to where you are today and what compelled you to write this latest book?
Wow. Okay. So quickly went to McGill, thought I was going to be a doctor, didn't like blood, transferred over to the concurrent Bachelor's of Art, Bachelor of Education program, thought then I was going to be an educator in high school, did that for 2 years, realized that, oh, I love education, but not 14 to 18-year-olds. Decided then to go back to school, then pitched myself to the Dean of Computing and Academic Studies at the British Columbia Institute of Technology and said, hey, you've got an empty downtown spanking new campus. How about I help build career-changing programs? And Dr. Ken Takagaki, for some reason, said yes. And so I did that for about 5 years, really learned how to not just develop a culture, but learned about learning and education and business and tech. It was just so much fun. And then I said, well, if I'm going to be better academic later on in life, maybe I should go into the real world. And so I moved over to high tech, spent 6-7 years between Business Objects and SAP. And then I switched over to telecom, and I spent 10 years at TELUS. Those two roles between the two companies, or three, basically as a chief learning officer. And so, not basically, I was. So I was looking after development of people, culture, external education services. And then I went on my own in 2018. And through that, I have, for whatever reason, published hundreds of articles, now on my sixth book, which is just weird. And somehow throughout that way, a wife of 31 years that still kind of loves me. I get in her way a lot, which is awful. So Denise Lamarche and 3 kids, Claire, Cole, and Kate, all at a master's degree in Sweden, TMU in Toronto, and McGill University in Montreal.
Great. What a great career trajectory and personal trajectory to celebrate. And congratulations on the 6th book. That
Thank
is
you.
very, very impressive. So you open this book with a very personal story about getting quietly dropped from a speaker's bureau right after you turned 50, which must have been about 5 years ago at this point.
Yeah.
How did that sting turn into what you're calling an emergency siren for the entire future of work?
Well, I like when I write books, at least to bring in some of me. It's not personal memoir material. That's not the point. But it just sort of hopefully grounds the reader. And look, I'm just like you. I'm a human being, and, bleep happens. And there I was. I had been out of TELUS in a full-time role for about 3-ish years, maybe 2 and a bit. And I had been with bureaus since about 2012, 2013 across Canada and the US. And so I've never been with a singular bureau, but I've had a bunch. This one was, I would say, one of my longest standing relationships. And I got a form letter, and it was like, that's weird. No notice, all kinds of gigs that I had done, and just good rapport. And so the follow-up, which I forced myself to do, was kind of like one of those, well, actually, we're refreshing the roster, and you don't fit. I was like, what does refreshing mean? Well, we've got maybe too many of you, and so we're gonna go younger. I was like, interesting.
Oh boy.
And so anyway, long story short, is like that was a wake-up call for me and what I missed, not just with that relationship, but I, of course, I went into my existential crisis of my leadership roles previous to that and said, what did I miss as a chief learning officer, as a chief envisioner, as a director of learning, as a head of business development and whatever roles I've had at BCIT, SAP, or TELUS? And I thought, yeah, I'm an idiot. Like I never thought about this. And so let me now dig into this and figure out what I missed and what else is going on, from whether it's demography, age, longevity, et cetera. And maybe, hopefully, mea culpa, come up with something that might be useful to others.
So what did you miss? What did you discover?
Well, even in the midst of, like, for example, at TELUS, as a chief learning officer, here I am arguably kind of in charge of not just the development of team members and leaders, but, how do people collaborate? What's the culture? How do people work from home during our work styles, etc.? It was one day, and this is a retrospective story. We had launched something in 2010 called Habitat Videos, which is essentially YouTube, but we thought, we were ahead of the curve by building out a way in which for people to create their own videos and to share them with the organization. I mean, that was literally 2010, so ahead of its time. What I didn't pick up on was that I had these two technicians in British Columbia, and they were filming themselves going up poles, going into what are called COs, central offices where all the wirings are and all the underground copper goes, et cetera. And they were filming themselves providing advice to other technicians. And I was like, well, this is really cool. Let's get them better cameras. But these technicians were, I would just say, older statespeople. And it didn't even dawn on me what they were doing was capturing their both tacit and actual knowledge and wisdom and sharing that to middle-aged or younger workers. And we were just like, these guys are amazing. But now in hindsight, doing that kind of reflection back, I would have gone across the organization in all kinds of roles and said, hey, smart people with lots of experience and they know where the bodies are buried and you've got all these good wrinkles like rings on a tree. That's wisdom. And so why aren't I capturing all of that wisdom so that others can learn from it in various and different ways? So that was one of those, oh, I'm an idiot. I could give me a title, but I wasn't thinking through age and experience and wisdom in a way that I would be if I was doing it now, if I was a CLO.
That's a great story that really brings it to life. And obviously, hindsight is 20/20 and all that good stuff. And when we're young, we don't necessarily think that way. But it's not too late because now you have this wonderful book that you've published and now you're going to educate lots of people on how to look at this in a different way. So you introduced the concept of age debt as the workplace equivalent of the climate crisis. Can you unpack what you mean by that and what you think most leaders are still sleepy and why most leaders are sleepwalking right through it?
So Naomi, if you think about climate crisis for where we live in Canada, we almost every May/June, we start hearing stories in Ontario and Quebec in the east, certainly in the prairies and certainly in British Columbia about fires. It's forest fire season. I'm 55-ish by the time this airs, and I never grew up with forest fire. I didn't even know, we didn't cross the vernacular. It didn't cross our radar. It wasn't even on the Hamilton Spectator newspaper that I grew up in Hamilton. Right? It was like, forest fires, what are they? So you might have the odd fire roadside thing that someone put out or spit out a cigarette butt and it's like a roadside fire, but not forest fires. Where am I going with this? The sort of proclivity for forest fires to occur every May, June now is just, it's consistent, it's happening, it's pervasive. It's because of climate change. It's when those forest fires are in the news, et cetera, you kind of take a step back. You're like, oh yeah, climate change. Holy smokes, like literally holy smokes. What are we going to do? Now take yourself inside an organization. Analogously, age debt is a climate crisis, but we don't have the forest fires yet. No one is screaming from the Hamilton Spectator or the news or wherever your media is and saying, hey, are you aware of these 4 things? And what are the 4 things of age debt that no one really is paying attention to? Number 1, demographic disruption. What's happening, Canada or otherwise, frankly, it's a worldwide problem other than the continent of Africa, is that birth rates are plummeting. Canada's birth rate is 1.26. The replacement rate is 2.1. British Columbia's, by the way, is 1.0. And people are living longer. So you have less young people with people living longer because of advances in healthcare technology, medication, right? We're healthier. We're not having, hopefully, 88 Guinnesses a day. That's not great. And so ostensibly what happens is there's less younger people coming up through the ranks, even with immigration. Our average age is increasing in the organization, and people aren't preparing ultimately for living longer. So you kind of got this longevity issue and this demographic disruption as 1 and 2 going together. Then number 3, you have ageism that still is happening, whether we are firing older people just because they make more money, not hiring younger people because, well, we can let AI hire those jobs, right? For sure. And then number 4, you have this wisdom transfer issue where no one is really thinking about the tacit, implicit, even direct knowledge that sits there. And it's gone when we fire them or lose them or they retire. So age debt are those 4 things: demographic disruption, kind of the longevity issue or ignorance, ageism, the last of the isms that we really haven't really thought about. And then the 4th, of course, is wisdom. No one's paying attention really to all of that. And that is where the debt is accruing. And until, I suppose, that fire comes, will any of us actually do anything about it? And my, I think, fiduciary responsibility to anyone that I know was to write a book to say, hey, I think there's an alarm bell here. I hope you read what I found out and maybe do something about it.
Yeah, so let's talk about that on that note. So your framework of rivers, rocks, and rubies reframes how we think about workers at different life stages. So what made you move away from generational labels and biases? And why do you think those labels are actually doing more damage in the workplace?
Now, I'm Gen X, but I'm Gen X because I am born in 1971. That means I'm part of a generation that was somewhere between 1964 and 1980. Okay, so does that mean, however, that I should be Gen X in the workplace? What is it that allows me, because I was born in 1971, to what do I do when I'm young versus middle age or old? And it becomes pejorative. I mean, we've seen this, and it happens to all of us, whether you're young, middle age, or old. So we went through at work a whole yo boomer or hey boomer era a couple years ago, and we were pejorative towards older workers by calling them hey boomers, and the things that they might do societally, we made fun of them in the organization.
By the way, my kids make fun of me by saying hey boomer, even though I am not a boomer. So it's still a thing.
Do they know you're a millennial?
Oh, thank you. That's so kind. I'm actually an X, but I call myself a Zennial because I feel more Zennial than I am X. But anyway, I digress.
It's okay. I get it. Well, and then if we make fun of Gen Zs, let's say, because like they're too peripatetic or distracted, or they're always on their phones and whatever, right? Like all of it is not good in the workplace because why? Well, we all have, depending on who you are, a 40, 50, or potentially 60-year career. And so we actually, this is where Tay-Tay comes in. Like I was thinking about Tay-Tay and the Eras tour. Like what a brilliant concept she had. She's like, well, I'm going to do this pocket of songs from this album and this pocket of songs. And like, these are my eras. This was my red era and so on. I was like, okay, girl, that's pretty good. And so I kind of took the metaphor and said, well, actually, don't we all go through 3 eras, regardless of what you kind of want to call that age? So if you're young, maybe that's 16 to 35, 30, 28. I don't care. That's your rivers era. That's where there's lots of what's called fluid intelligence. You're learning, you're mistaking, if that's a verb. You are like just trying to figure your way around life, but also mostly work. And then you kind of graduate. You come more solid, stoic. You've got some processes down. So I call it the rock. So you're a rock in your own river. So you're still fluid. Like your river's still flowing, but now you've developed some sturdiness, and that's the rock era. And again, maybe you're 25, maybe you're 35. It doesn't matter. And it doesn't matter when that ends. Like it doesn't really matter to me. So if I'm fixated at Gen X at work, I'm 71 or aged between 64 and 80, or years 1964 and 1980. But then I enter my Ruby era. That's where I think I am right now, personally. And so I think I entered that actually in the year 2018 when I left TELUS and become a solopreneur. And so at that age, I am 47. So that just happened to be my Ruby era, where I believe I've earned and learned a lot of wisdom. Now I'm still learning. I'm still a rock. I'm still a river, right? But I've got abilities about looking around corners. Being able to write a book like this cannot happen when I'm 28. So the 3 eras, River, Rock, Ruby, is my homage to Tay-Tay, I suppose. But mostly it's like, let's get rid of calling people Zennials or Gen Xers. And just because I might like Pearl Jam doesn't mean I'm coming to work in grunge outfits and wearing plaid. I mean, don't stereotype me because I was born in 1971. Help me understand what I need to do and learn in these eras so that I can become a better professional.
I love that. And to your point, I entered maybe not a Ruby era, but I kind of left corporate, far younger than 55 or 65. And I'm still learning a ton. I hope that I'm still making impact on the world. And so, my era does not line up with the fact that I'm a Generation X. So I really love that framing.
Amazing. And I agree. So it's really up to you. It's not like I want an organization to go out and classify, if there's a small, medium-sized business that's got 3,000 employees, like, okay, how many rubies we got? How many, that's not the point. The point is leaders, like whether they're OD, HR, L&D, or just in the corporate C-suite or leaders anywhere, they kind of should, I would hope, argue and want to adopt something like this rather than classifying people by an age, year, and birth. This way, it just gives them a sense like, oh yeah, so we're helping these people through and just being better human beings through it. Let's stop the nonsensical nature that we can, from a generational or birth year perspective, say, oh, Naomi, guess what? Did you like Wham? Are you a Wham fan?
I am,
and then
actually.
everything becomes about George Michael and Andrew Ridgeley. Like, that's just not helpful in the workplace.
Yeah,
funny, but yeah.
Yeah, but to your point, that means let's not take Dan off the Speakers Bureau list because he's turned 50, right? So that was a very bad mistake. Big mistake.
Or let's not hire someone who's young, meaning, just because they like Juice WRLD, or they're into Tay-Tay and that's it, or whoever, Renee Rapp, whoever, it doesn't matter. It's that metaphor, right? It's not just about music, obviously. It's like, just because they're young doesn't mean that they don't have creativity and ideas and some goodness that they can bring to the office. You gotta stop thinking about, to me, like these generations and just birth years. Think about people as human beings going through these eras.
Yeah, that makes sense. And so let's take it one step further in practical terms. The book draws on the tension between fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. So what does that look like when an organization gets that balance wrong? Let's start with what are the two and how do they differ, and what happens when the balance is off?
So fluid intelligence essentially is, I sort of agree with these, by the way. So these are social scientist terms, but so fluid intelligence is depicted by you at some stage in your life that is the early part of your career where you have lots of ideas, lots of questions. There are mistakes. There is the generation of ideas, intellect, you're doing. Like, there's lots of hey, why not? So lots of curiosity, and it's all good. And then arguably that fluidity of intelligence crystallizes, over time. So, you go from the river to the rock to the ruby. And the ruby is sort of this crystallized intelligence of wisdom, experience by mistake. We've done this before. Have you thought about it this way? And you're able to see the cracks, see around corners, use context in a way that you didn't have, in your earlier fluid intelligence years. Both are important. Arguably, to me, there's a third, which is the rock, which is really kind of the melding of the two on your way to fully crystallized. So I argue that all three are important. Now, what happens if your organization is not paying attention to demography? If you ultimately end up and wind up with too many rubies, that's not a great idea. And that's not because I'm against, obviously I am one, rubies. It's that you're missing out on what brain and activity and verve and personality and just learnings happen at the river and rock eras, or the fluid intelligence eras. Because that kind of, I had this, did you think of it this way? When you're a fluid, intelligent, or younger worker, middle-aged worker at the river rock level, you think about things that has not happened before. And so if you're full of rubies without any of the rivers or rocks, that's bad. If you're full of just middle sandwich generation rocks who are stressed from raising kids and dealing with older parents and grandparents at home, plus the workforce demands at that rock level. So you have all rocks, that's also bad because you just have an overly stressed organization where wisdom can't come trickle down from the rubies and ideas or other fluidity pieces from the rivers can't trickle up. If your organization, which we're going to get hate mail for this, but if it's just full of young people, even if it's a startup, you're like, well, where is the wisdom and the wise words of what ifs happening from, whether you don't have any rocks or rubies? Give you a couple examples. So do you remember back in the day, Naomi, when Facebook was Facebook and sort of almost like a cool place to be? Well, Mark Zuckerberg hired Sheryl Sandberg as COO, if I'm not mistaken, 10 or 12 years older to his senior. Why? Well, because Mark and team over there at Harvard, and then graduating out of that and sort of doing their thing in Silicon Valley, were running wild with ideas. And there wasn't a, quote, adult in the room, a rock and or a ruby that was providing the context and counsel. So in my argument, without Sandberg's hiring and the team that she brought in as well, other rocks and a few rubies, by the way, I don't believe Meta would be what Meta is today. And that's just a pretty prolific statement to say because you're like, isn't Zuckerberg a genius and all the things that he's done with that team? Yeah. But my argument is that it's not happening unless you got that rock and or ruby in the room.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. And I've worked with and heard of others working with clients who don't have the balance properly. And it's frustrating because either you don't get things done, you're not able to kind of zone in on one idea to take forward, or there's not enough room for brainstorming before landing on kind of that fixed idea, right? So the balance is really important. So let's talk about the antithesis of age debt, which is what you call experience dividend. So for leaders who want to actually capture that dividend rather than just nod at the idea, where do you start? And let's explain what the experience dividend is first.
Okay. So first off, from age debt to the experience dividend, my other argument is this, Naomi, if which I did put in the book, but I only found out about this like in January when I reread the book during an editing phase. I was like, oh, I wish I put this in, but I didn't. Age debt, if you don't do anything about the experience dividend, will turn into rage debt. You're going to get a lot of people raging fireworks everywhere because you're not planning appropriately for what it is that's going to happen. So rage debt will happen, that for sure. So what is the experience dividend? The antithesis, what a great word. The hope. I wrote the book like an album. So side A is age debt. There's 5 tracks, lots of music references. Think of it kind of like this is like the dark side of the moon, right? This is it's dark on side A. It is. And it is highlighting what's wrong. Again, the points we've talked about. Flip the album over to side B before any rage debt happens. It's the experience dividend. And those tracks really focus on 3 main ideas. So number 1 is called the career canvas. Number 2 is the wisdom wheel, and number 3 is the longevity lens. So just a brief definition. So the career canvas, I am still the recovering CLO and people and culture leader, executive guy. So I'm always working with either those teams or organizations. I still don't understand, Naomi, why we have job classifications, job families, and most importantly, the career ladder that anoints people at certain levels to move up, and that's how their careers operate. I mean, it's just in this day, that's like the climate crisis, not smelling the smoke of the fire. Like, let's burn the ladder. Let's get rid of it because there's so much fixation on up that when our workforce demographics are inevitably going to change, we need to think of a canvas. And if you think about artists and their canvas, where they got all the different oil paintings, colors, brushes, right? Different even canvases to work from, they're free to sort of choose how they art. I know I'm turning that into a verb. So why don't we career canvas ourselves in our organizations where We might allow people, like God forbid, a rotation or a stint in another part of the organization for 6 or 12 months, and they still have their other job back on the other side of the house so that they get experience and networking or whatever. I don't care how big your company is either, or organization, public sector or not-for-profit. How about allowing people to step down? So meaning maybe they're a leader, maybe they're SVP, VP, director, doesn't matter. But you know what? They're going through something. And whatever that is, maybe it's their own mental wellness, maybe it's their social wellness, maybe it's something going on at home. Could they possibly step down from their director level role and maybe do something at an individual contributor level for a while? Maybe they're going through menopause, whatever it is. Like, can we help? Instead, we push people up, and the only way to make pay and increases in competence and pay ultimately is going up. So my argument in the canvas is like, we need to rethink careers, not only through those 3 eras, but how and what people do for their careers. So that's number 1. Number 2, wisdom wheel. We kind of talked about this a little bit, but the result of this is, what is the organization doing to capture and share? And this is, again, at all River, Rock, Ruby levels. Like, there's so much intellect at a river level that if we're not capturing it, and again, with AI and cognitive task analyses and all ways in which to do this so easily today, why aren't we? And then using some goodness for artificial intelligence for a change, and then allowing that to assimilate, cut it down, provide it, put it out, let people access it in whatever way, kind of your own organization's LLM or whatever you want. Number 3, longevity lens. We are so blind to the fact that we're living longer that the average Canadian who is now in my bracket in this 50 to 59 range has saved $88,000 for retirement. And that's the average. So we need to do a way better job of letting people know they're going to live longer, and what can we do to help them plan for financially, but also mentally, socially, physically. How do we make menopause changes in the organization for women who are going through it? How do we have maybe grandparent care days where those who are in the organization well into their 60s or 70s can have maybe a mental, physical wellness day because they're a grandparent. Go take their grandkid out. You can see where I'm going, is that as the workforce demography changes, there are longevity lens changes we need to make now in order to prepare and re-architect what that organization actually stands for.
Great segue to my final question before we wrap up. HR. We have a lot of listeners who are HR leaders, HR professionals. What can HR do? Like, what should they start with, given the 3 things that you just mentioned, the wisdom wheel, the canvas, and the longevity lens? What can HR do to start moving things in the right direction?
I'm going to be a bit un-Canadian right now, Naomi.
Go for it. We have lots of listeners all around the world, not just in Canada.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying I'm Canadian. I'm going to be very un-Canadian. And I wouldn't normally probably say this, but for listeners, I love you. You're my people. This is People and Culture and HR. I've been in your profession for years. This is the first thing you have to do. You have to get your head out of the sand. I believe that because our profession has been so fixated on the other fires, and rightly so, whether you're discombobulated with the 9-box system, whether you're trying to eliminate annual performance reviews, the whole 9 yards of the HR profession, the head in the sand of this age debt is going to bite you, and you need to get the head out and sort of now say, oh, well, what should I do? And whether that's starting with burning the career ladder and looking at maybe 3 eras, whether that's looking at wisdom and how we capture, whether that's pieces to the longevity lens, that part I'm not as concerned about. What I'm concerned about with HR, you've got to own this. There is no one in the organization that is going to lead this unless you step up and say, okay, so I know this may sound like this is a long-term thing, but actually I am in charge of the long-term future-proof health of this organization. We need to think about this for our next 10 years if this organization wants to survive. The CFO is not going to do it. The CCO, COO, CRO, CEO are not going to do it. It needs to be at a board level. Secondly, if your company has a board, if your organization has one, and the HR portfolio has to put this on the docket. This is the second part, right? Of concerns and planning for the future proof of the org. So those are my two requests ultimately of what HR should be thinking about.
We are getting to the end of our time together. So before we say goodbye, I'd love to just ask you how our listeners can get in touch with you and learn more about the great work you're doing.
Well, whether you believe in the Kings/Queens English or of American variety, the future of work is gray.com. You could spell gray either way. And it'll take you to the book and other lots of goodies and things. There's a couple assessments you could do. One is the personal age assessment. So you testing yourself on how prepared you are for age debt. And then there's an organizational assessment as well. Both are free. And those are kind of fun things to do to see if you're age savvy or not.
Fantastic. We will put that link in the show notes. And we always wrap up with a feel good. So Dan, what are you feeling good about today?
I just found out yesterday that when I mentioned our three kids, that the eldest got into the school of choice for her master's in Stockholm, Sweden. And so I've been, you live through your kids sometimes, in my case, most of the times, vicariously. And what a moment to sort of find out that Claire is off doing her master's in sustainability and environmental policy at the #1 institute in the world that actually has this. 18 people selected. She's one of 18. Big tears yesterday for this kid.
Amazing. Well, huge congratulations. Congratulations, Claire, if you listen. And it's been great just catching up with you again, Dan. Congratulations on the latest book as well. And until next time, everyone, take care.